Okay, guys, let's get it started. Thank you guys for being here. So this is the second episode of MEV Space. So MEV Space is to bring together the sharpest minds in crypto to dissect the evolving MEV landscape. So today I'm pleasure to have Blair Marshall, who is the MEV solution architect for Fastlane, to join us as a co-host. Blair, would you please care to introduce yourself? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Happy to be here. Excited to be on the hosting side instead of the guest side, so you don't have to listen to my bad takes. I can just ask the questions. Yeah, so I started out in my career at Block Native for 3 or 4 years, and recently joined the Fastlane team to help on the on-chain MEV auction system that we have called Atlas. So excited to be talking to our guests, our panelists. So let's get it going.
Okay, we have three awesome speakers here. So let's start from Luis. Luis, would you mind introduce yourself? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for inviting Luis here. I work at Brainbot on a project called Shatter Network, which is a threshold encryption DKG, and essentially we utilize it especially as an encrypted mempool solution, so encrypting transactions and having the block producer commit to ordering an inclusion of transactions while they're still encrypted, and then only decrypt afterwards. And then we also apply the same kind of encryption decryption mechanism to other use cases, for example, DAO voting and Snapshot.
Awesome, great. So also our second speaker is David Phillips, who has given a speech during to Thailand, if I'm right. So yeah, David, please feel free to go ahead.
Oh, I'm glad that made it. Glad that made the rounds. First of all, huge shout out to EigenFi, consistently producing the best research on what's actually happening on chain and with extremely high rigor. So big respect there. I work on a project with a few buddies. We're still pretty stealth, but we do a lot of MEV stuff, a lot of auction stuff, and yeah, just having a bunch of fun. Running MEV strats and making the system go.
Okay, our last speaker is Yuki from Solero Labs, also Flatbush Capital. Yeah, please go ahead. Okay.
Hi, this is Yuki, and yeah, I'm with this project called Saga Labs. We're trying to build a system to recapture a bunch of MEMs for LPs. So we're trying to make more money for LPs on AMMs. Yeah.
Are AMMs cursed? That's my question for you, Yuki. Are they cursed? Will MEV destroy them all?
What do you mean by curse?
Will they ever be able to overcome the MEV headwind that they face in a discrete time system?
I think as long as the blockchain, especially Ethereum L1, as long as Ethereum is gonna stay in a discrete time, I would expect the AMM to persist for a foreseeable future.
Sweet.
Yeah.
I'll give you a chance to get on the soapbox and shout about Sorella because it's cool.
Thanks, man. But I do think that given enough latency optimization with some of the L2s that we're seeing today, like if the per block time becomes one day becomes like 50 milliseconds or even less, there will be a time where this kind of like AMM will stop making more sense, where it may only exist for long tail tokens, perhaps. So that is a possible future. But again, at least on Ethereum, I don't see that happening anytime soon.
Okay, let's get to it. So our today's topic is searchability integration, and all four builders can refuse. So let's first give some big picture about the current scenario. So like in the first 11 months of 2024, three search builders, aka frontrunner Young, Coffee Babe, and Turbo Builder. So they put in a staggering 9,000 ETH as tips from just like 13,000 transactions. So all of these minor tips includes like hacks, arbitrages, and liquidations. So it's definitely such a build integration has become a pretty great phenomenon the ecosystem cannot afford to ignore. So before we dive into like specific cases and solutions, I want to start with all the speakers and co-host perspectives on where we are in the evolution and how your work addresses kind of challenges. So how about start from Blair?
Yeah, sure. I like to kind of start at a high level and look at PBS. We brought in PBS to kind of at first we just had flashbots. We wanted to decentralize away from flashbots, so it wasn't only flashbots doing the kind of heavy lifting there. And now we've had a good year or two of this like PBS system, and we've seen it really consolidate on the builder side to mainly two builders, and then on the kind of searcher builder integration, it's like you were saying, there's just those three real heavy duty searcher builders that are doing the heavy lifting on the tip side. But I would hand it over to our guests. I'm really more interested in their opinion on where do we think we are with searcher builder integration and PBS in general, and what are you looking forward to in 2025? Like, where do you think we're going? Whoever wants to take it can take it.
Sure. I think one point that I feel like that are often not being discussed very much is when we have this kind of searcher builder integrations, there hasn't been a lot of discussions around like, how much are the builders actually rebating the searchers to begin with. Like I've seen some academics write research papers about builder profits, and on surface the builder profit may look very big because you're just tallying up the amount of bids that they have given to the validators, and then try to sort of like calculate this is how much profit that they would have made. But in reality, if especially when they are integrated with searchers and some trading shops, they're oftentimes also giving back a fair bit of those MEV back to the searchers themselves. So I think just looking at the builder's profit on surface wouldn't be sufficient to really kind of like understand how much builders are actually making, especially given that there's this sort of incentive split between the searchers and builders that we've seen today. And frankly, I don't even know what are the exact percentage of each different builders that are doing this kind of rebates.
Yeah, I mean, anyone who really knows how the rebates work off chain is not allowed to talk about it and incentivized not to talk about it, because if you know about it, you're making money from it. So none of the dashboards that people use, or like the data that people are pulling to write the research on the topic, is missing a pretty critical part. But there's builders are specialized at building good blocks. Searchers are specialized at finding risk-free trades usually. And so there's edge or margin to be had at each of those. And so it's inevitable that we converge, right? That you can, if you have an ARB or if you have a bundle, you can make more money by controlling where it's oriented within the block. And so people talk about it as like, oh, is this centralizing, or is this good, or is this bad? And it's inevitable convergence of the economic design of the system, really. So it's we're going to see more searcher builder integration, and because that's how you win. And the thing that we haven't really touched on that is like more important to driving the searcher builder integration is the builders want to make money, and so they're very much in a proprietary flow game, because the only way you really win on the block building side is by having transactions that other builders don't have.
Yeah, so just to agree with this, that it's inevitable, kind of obvious if you think about it, that kind of one of the first questions you would have if you're trying to separate all these roles, proposer, builder separation, searcher separation, right? And one of the first thoughts you would have, just naively, I think, is like, okay, what keeps them separated, right? So why don't they just integrate? So I agreed. I think it's part of the larger sort of just picture of, just as Les said, kind of this bigger picture of when we introduced PBS, we kind of made builders pretty influential and strong. We gave them a lot of power essentially, and I think part of the solution to mitigate some of these potentially bad outcomes from integration, so proposer builder integration or builder searcher integration, is probably going to be to try to give back a little bit more of the transaction selection sort of power back to proposers, and do things like have more kind of proposer commitment, things like this, or even so we're building encrypted mempools. Yeah, just sort of giving more power back to proposers, and essentially I think is part of the solution.
You think that the proposers with their current monopoly need more power? Just want to make sure I understand, because that's a novel take. Is saying we need more power to go back down to the block proposer.
That's a big statement.
I think not a novel take. I think Vitalik hints at this in one of the newest blog posts, just saying sort of like transaction selection is something that we sort of took away right from proposers, and we might have to address. And there's kind of multiple composer things and other sort of proposals that I think would help. Obviously proposer monopoly is a problem on the other side, but sort of like I think it's not a novel take, I would say.
So but what you would advocate for is proposer builder reintegration, in a sense.
No, I think maybe what Lewis is referring to is more some sort of like a censorship resistance stuff, right? For like the inclusion comedy.
That makes sense. That makes much more sense. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think let's get to the specific questions. So actually, my first question is actually for David, because like you definitely know a lot about order flows and those kind of side deals. So what do you think? Like, how do you calculate the actual net income of a builder?
That's so. There's things you can say and there's things that you cannot say. Right. Most of these agreements are deep behind NDAs. You have to imagine, like, I can't tell you, oh yeah, this is the general ratio. But with what I can tell you is flow is quite valuable, and the block builder's position of getting that flow is commoditizable. And so you can imagine the flow provider in that arrangement has much more leveraged power than the builder in negotiating that deal. So it will skew towards settlement. It'll skew towards value capture at the flow provider level, depending on the type of flow. So you generally would have to. It's not really possible to do with the data that's available in the world, is the short answer to the question.
I think the best we can do is to first of all understand what is the kind of like leverage on play. But imagine if you're like a traders who have your own alpha that I guess not many people knows, and you go to two builders that we have today, Titan and other SCP Beaver guys, and be like, hey, I'm interested in working with you guys, but I want to pick whichever ones that gives me the best offer. So like just from this kind of layup, you can sort of clearly see like who is in the vantage point here to decide and pick which one they want to be able to work with and provide exclusive flow to. So I think, I would expect not going to be a significant percentage going to the builders. And in fact, I think builders' profit may get even more commoditized as more parties like Titans, like Beavers come into the play as well.
Now, Yuki, do you see there being an increase in the number of participants given the current system, or is the compressing factor too strong? Because what we see was Wintermute and rsync basically giving up, because when the market converged around buying flow or gathering up private flow, Wintermute and rsync just basically gave up and stepped out of the market.
Frankly, like I don't think that we are quite there to the point that we're gonna have a lot like different compressing factor coming in that's gonna like kick Beaver or like Titan out of the game. I don't believe that's the case, and in fact, I think that for foreseeable future, most likely these two folks gonna still remain pretty dominant in the space. I think if I were to speculate on any potential entries into the futures, is if some large market makers, whether it be coming from like the more TradFi space, but maybe something they have some alpha to do with like ETH related stuff, comes in and be like, hey, this is a piece of alpha that I have that other people in more like crypto native space don't, and can start leveraging on that. And if they were to actually go ham on doing that, then it may make sense for them to actually spin out a new builder of some sort if they don't want to integrate. But other than that, I don't see a compressing factors at the moment.
Yeah, I don't really see it either. It doesn't seem to me like we're going to increase the diversity of the set of builders anytime soon, just because those operations are highly specialized. Nobody really knows that, it's largely a factor of relay design that makes it the case. But to run a competitive builder, you're spending at least $200K a month on AWS bills. Now it used to be 50K, then it was 100K, now it's at least, it's pushing up and up because the latency games that you have to play in the to be competitive bidder in the block auction are really, really difficult and super high bandwidth, and you have to be geographically distributed around the world to be closest to every relay or every set of proposers.
Do you think if we stayed on this path, we're going to have one dominant builder versus the two?
We already could, right? But the builders very clearly played this game where they try not to go above 50%, but still capture their most profitable blocks.
So you think that one of the two participants is restricting themselves to ensure
I think
they
all
stay
participants. I'm not saying I think one of them is. I'm saying pretty. You can look at what happens on chain, where, for example, if certain applications go down or something like that, you'll see ratios push up, and then you'll see the types of blocks getting landed. They start changing, and then you'll see you can observe like the type of bids change, the size of the bids change. Right? It's very clearly a phenomenon where it's no single party wants to step into that because the Ethereum ecosystem has a pretty strong immune system towards dominant single parties.
So you think it's a conscious choice that they're making to like reduce bids or hurt their own latency?
I'm fully confident and certain that's the case. I'm not uncertain.
Yeah, I personally am surprised that it hasn't started to go in a more one, or at least a 1A and 1B instead of this kind of like 50-50 at the top.
Well, the type, it's like Beaver lands the trading blocks and Titan lands sniping blocks. Right? That's what we see. And then the jump blocks, sometimes other builders will overbid to try and subsidize so they can pad their resume to say, oh, we've been a block builder.
Yeah, like right now, we're having the market dump and Beaver jumps out way ahead of everyone. And rsync always comes back too when there's volatility. Yeah. Anyone else have any comments on the 2 versus 1 builder view?
I think personally, I'm actually kind of interested in seeing a world where we actually only have one builder, because right now I feel like a lot of the EF people, like while they are very much aware of the centralization factor, but at the same time, like they don't really like consider this as a sort of urgent matter, which I understand because they kind of just assume that somehow the market is gonna reach some sort of equivalence between like the power of like these two builders. But if that tips over at some point and becomes like one builder, then I feel like a lot of the community response to this like builder market will become very different, because now if every single, or if 90% of the blocks are being built by single entity, then the prospect of Ethereum transaction supply chain being like more decentralized or whatnot becomes super skewed. And I wonder at that point, what kind of stuff is going to spew out of the EF as well. Yeah.
So you just view it as a forcing mechanism for change.
I think to some extent, yeah. Which is why I think it will be interesting to see if that actually does happen and tips over.
Yeah, I think that's a fair take. Is there so given where we are, the negatives are sort of obvious on PBS and having a two builder system on like things like censorship and the whole OFAC conversation, which anyone's welcome to chime in on that. But I'd be curious: are there what are the biggest positives or like benefits to having these new or not that new anymore, these entities that are highly sophisticated at creating blocks, and how do applications or how do users or anyone other than traders, how do they leverage these highly sophisticated actors and get some benefit out of them?
I think just on top of my mind, I think there are 2 points. One is obviously like validators making more money. That is probably the biggest advantage for if you were like ETH stakers trying to make money on the yield. But I think another point that could be that I oftentimes consider is around the sort of like the growing private mempool situation with the searcher builders proliferation. I think on the surface it may sound not great, but I do believe that the fact that searcher builders are doing this kind of stuff, or like even some application are working with builders to facilitate this kind of stuff, whether it be some TG bot or whatever, is to some extent trying to provide a better utility or better UX for the end users, whether it be some like people who are trying to snipe, or whether it be trying to like get into some positions with their trades or whatever. That, in my opinion, is a improved UX for the users. And this is also something that we as a Sorella application, we are also trying to leverage more, as we can kind of do more things with private mempool than being able to just like send order flow directly to some builders and try to get inclusion guarantees that way as well.
Yeah, and I think what Yuki's saying here is really important, because there's these market dynamics where people are incentivized to profit, and with correctly designed systems, or novel systems like what they're doing, which is great, you can reorient, you can redesign these games where the user or the flow providers are the ones that directly benefit. So it's pretty cool, and it seems like it's the inevitable path the future takes.
It's just like in the traditional finance, right? We have brokers and this general broker sort of ecosystem having just more information and more order flow, and they can ultimately provide better prices and can enable something like very low fee, give it back to the customers, right? Give the fees back to the customers and have ultra low fees. Yeah. So I mean that's a positive, right? Just like having, because we have that system that we have the higher market efficiency around centralization then is ultimately giving back value, can be leveraged to give back value to users, basically.
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest advantages I see is like the spam issue. That's not nearly as much of an issue anymore on Ethereum because of this. And you see the rise of Base and how much of their blocks are just spam. So, to me, the whole like push for 1 gigagas per second is not it's kind of pointless if you have spam. So yeah, I think that's where they really help out.
There's the Nash equilibrium that we find with the cost of spam and the amount of yield that you can provide with it. If we bring the cost of transactions to zero, like sending an email, you'll just have infinite spam.
You mean Solana?
Yeah.
I mean, something
Shots
funny that I think would be good to bring up here is one of the outcomes of PBS that nobody really talks about is it actually made sandwiching risk-free for searchers. Because before in PGA days, if you were trying to sandwich someone, there was a chance you weren't going to land your transactions and you were going to burn your fees. And now with full revert protection, you know, if it makes that more common value if there's transactions publicly in a public pool that can be sandwiched, but it means that we'll always have someone that does that, and that value gets passed down to the block proposer.
Actually, I remember back in the day when some people were criticizing PBS for that exact reason, because they were saying like, oh, now like sandwich is kind of incentivized, and which is to some extent true, because yeah, it did make sandwich almost free, and people can spam sandwich as much as they want. And I think, but this, like the framing of saying that like PBS makes sandwich free, which is true, but that itself, in my opinion, isn't like the main negative here. I think we should be aware that the broader sort of category of like a bundled transactions, including sandwiches, can be better utilized way more than this kind of like just doing this kind of extractive behavior, but also from more like application perspective, built into the logic of the application such that this kind of extractive behavior can be better moderated to some extent. So I think from my perspective, what I've seen with a lot of this, like, PBS enabling more MEV extraction, whatever, it was that people saw the negative of those like new systems, but didn't quite saw sort of like the upside, the potential upside of those new system. And that's kind of where I think we're starting to get into a stage where people are starting to build more things that are very aware of the existing PBS system, the transaction supply chain, such that we can better leverage it to prevent these kind of negatives that we have mentioned previously.
Okay, let's move on to our next question. So we have all these like different new solutions like to solve the problems of decentralization or centralization or PBS, like inclusion lists, for example, like Fossil or MCP. So in terms of all these solutions, what's your opinion on how they can like target the search ability integration? So how about we start from Luis?
Yeah, I think essentially slightly touched on that in the beginning. So I think that if you do things like Fossil or kind of sort of inclusion list, that's a way to give more transaction selection power to proposers, and then probably you need a tester proposer separation to kind of mitigate some of the proposer that giving too much power to proposers back, sort of, right? But then, yeah, I think that's and then I guess multiple concurrent proposer would be a way also to mitigate some of this by decentralizing more. So I think in general, those things are things we can do on the protocol level that would, could be a force for, again, shifting the power a little bit. And then, again, shameless plug, the sort of encrypted mempool, right, where you have encrypted, currently where how we would do it right now on one would be via a proposer commitment scheme, right? So you would leverage some for example, chain bounds, proposer commitment architecture to users could then get a proposer commitment on including encrypted transactions, and the proposers would have to commit to including these sort of while they're still encrypted, right? And then hopefully and the builder would also be forced to include them, right? And yeah, so that and then we might be able to. This is kind of in the realm of more about baseline neutrality and more about kind of censorship resistance. I think less about front running. But yeah, so that's I think one thing or an area of things that could be done, I would say.
Do you think that there's a possibility of having like the adverse effect of making it more centralized because you are like if you're a builder and you are engaged in censorship for whatever your reasons are, and you're trying to be forced into including some transaction, you're probably just gonna opt out. And so those who have to do that for whatever their reasons are will just opt out in more of these blocks, making those who don't have to opt out, win more often. Do you think that is a legitimate concern or argument?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And then it will probably reduce the viability of this mechanism for transactions that are less time sensitive, right? Then people would, because the user would still get their transaction in if they use this mechanism, right? And then it would just have to wait longer until a builder that that subscribes to that is kind of that is okay with that and kind of gives the transaction to the proposer or right adheres to it. So then it would limit the amount. Then it would probably go away from trading type of transactions more so to kind of transactions that are censorship prone to censorship, right?
Yeah, makes sense.
Um,
Any other? Yeah, go ahead.
I think my general framework around a lot of the MCP and the full source stuff is that, well, first of all, I don't think like MCP is gonna make sense on Ethereum. It also will be sort of like a lighter version of it, MCP that will be operating on top of existing Ethereum that would be a lot more like easier plug and play version instead of like having to re-architect the entire network to accommodate for multiple proposals. So I think personally, I'm pretty excited for that. And that will definitely help bring more power back to the network, not just the proposer, or not really the proposer, but mostly to the network. So you have a committee that can essentially put proposer on a watch to make sure that some of the transactions that were censored can be included. But putting that aside, I noticed that Louis mentioned about the APS, and and I think personally, like I'm not quite sold on this idea of APS in general because like there's quite a bit of like work to be done to integrate all of those like the integrate APS into the base layer for the very little benefit that could potentially be resolved on an application layer. Like I feel like PBS. One view that I hold is that PBS is currently working. It isn't perfect. There are a lot of things that can be tweaked and adjusted. But APS to me just feels like another sort of way to push the centralization to vector to another level. And that centralization vector will remain to exist. But it's just on a different level, and somehow that's better. Like that argument, in my opinion, doesn't stand. Especially also given that there's a lot of changes that needs to happen in order for APS to even go live on Ethereum. So yeah, I'm generally not quite bullish on APS. Yeah, APS.
Yeah, intuitively, I have the same problem with it, but I probably an expert on it could probably answer why why it is okay to have a testers have that kind of to push it more to testers, and that's a more safer thing than how it is currently.
Well, one of the new developments of kind of PBS is this TE and BuilderNet from Flashbots. I'd be curious to get everyone's opinion on what impacts they foresee in 2025 from the BuilderNet on PBS and Searcher Builder integration, if any, and if there are some other ancillary benefits that you're excited about or trying to look into. Be curious how everyone's viewing that.
If no one, I can go first. I'm personally have been always supportive of this idea of decentralized block building, but I think there was a time where I always also thought that the notion of decentralized block building is always like a bit of a only exists in a utopia. And the biggest reason why is because decentralizing block building is kind of like going against the incentive rabbit hole, and you're trying to like push backwards to the incentive slope, meaning that you are making the system a little bit less efficient, potentially making less money for validators to make the network more decentralized. And I think the argument, so that was always the argument against decentralized block building, but there was one argument for it, which is that, well, besides the benefit of decentralization, which is that, well, if many smaller searchers, builders can participate in this network and share the flow collectively without having this kind of like trust overhead on top, which I guess they're trying to solve with TE, then perhaps a collective can be a bigger source of flow than a centralized entity that has to do all this like private deals with the searcher builder partnership type of things. So that potentially could be a vision that I personally would be quite excited to see happening on Ethereum. And if it does happen, I think that would be a great win for BuilderNet or for a tool which Xerox Princess is also working on as well. I think that effort is definitely very very cool. Hope that it will be a fruitful one as well.
So is it fair to say that you think the size of the pie will potentially grow, but the division of that pie is probably going to be the same?
I don't know. Wait, when you say division of the pie, you mean like the division between, let's say, the BuilderNet and the Beaver build? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I mean, like the overall, I guess either blocks won or value extracted. Those are the two metrics that probably matter the most. I guess blocks won, that obviously can't change. So value one, I guess, would go up potentially, but the way that value is divided amongst builders and searchers is probably not going to change that much, or do you think it will change a lot?
Oh, I understood. But I think the idea with the BuilderNet to some extent is that, one, it lowers the barrier of entry for people to come in with this like a shared pool of order flow that everyone's trying to build a block on, and two, because it lowers the boundary, that now, well, in the future, any like searcher who has any remote capacity of like being able to run an efficient software will be able to basically like come in and be like, hey, I want to be part of the BuilderNet and try to tap into this like a shared order flow network within the TE. And so I feel like now you're kind of like blurring this notion of like searcher builder division, because every searchers could potentially be its own builder by the definition of like this kind of like BuilderNet type of things. So I think that would definitely make that split between searcher builder a little bit less clear, in my opinion.
Yeah, makes sense. Any other responses to that?
I mean, it's obviously decentralizing block building is pretty exciting. I think that searchers today have a bit of hesitancy around system fragility, and really wanting to make sure that it's super reliable, because what's happening inside the box is very hard to manage in real time. And so as these things, as the dynamism of searching and block building can make that difficult. So I'm excited and look forward to helping Flashbots at this with some point soon, to help build a more resilient, more decentralized version of the future.
One question that I think this is a burning question for me, really, for any of this kind of like decentralized block building network, including building it as well, which is that, well, they have to do some bootstrapping of the network and kind of cross this like gap of incentive so that the validators are still happy using builder nets to some extent. And for that, I was wondering that maybe token could be a solution for them to really cross that gap and make it more incentive compatible for existing validators who are already making a bunch of money from beavers and titans. But yeah, I don't know.
So Yuki, do you think that the validators really have much of a choice in the matter? Because the validator's job will always be take the most valuable block. Pretty simple.
I agree, but there are scenario where if, like, let's say, David, you're searching, right? And you decide what is the most optimal way for me to execute on the alpha that I have today. And obviously, collectively, right now the builder net is still very small, and there's a bit of a chicken and egg problem. Because if the builder net simply don't get as much inclusion for the blocks from the entire builder net, you simply just submit that same order flow to Beaver or Titans and whatnot. And if you do that, then technically the builder nets aren't really getting as much edge as they would have liked.
Yeah, I think the the flywheel effect that they need to get is going to be slow. It's going to take a lot of time for them, because like the hope is that this decentralized block building will lead to new novel strategies that it has access to, even if it has I guess it has more of like the Venn diagram of private order flow is larger for this builder, this decentralized builder, and therefore can have new novel strategies that create new value that the other ones cannot create. And for that to happen, I think it's gonna be a slow process to really like see in the numbers, like on Relay Scan or whatever. But eventually, if that flywheel gets going, they'll win more and more percentage of the share of blocks, and then hopefully you get a pretty massive shift going from centralized builders to this decentralized one, and then you're in a good spot.
There's one more thing that I think it's good to bring up now is there's clear demand to capture the value of your own flow for applications like Blink Labs, a searcher network, I guess searcher auction network, has probably as close to 20% of all flow in Ethereum right now, and it's not very known, not very talked about, but they do. And so what that tells us is there's strong demand to make money when you produce flow as an application builder or for your users. Now, the rebates and refund rules that they've come up with at Blink are, varied and deal by deal, but generally keep their partners sufficiently happy. For something like BuilderNet to achieve escape velocity, it needs to have better refund logic somehow, or make the flow providers more money, because decentralization is great, and some actors are willing to step away from profit for the sake of their values and long-term minded, for being long-term minded. But any system where we're asking people to choose certain value schemas over the most economically viable short-term decision, I think we could identify as having room for improvement.
Actually, to the point that David you mentioned, do we currently have a clarity around how if there is going to be any sort of rebate scheme that is going to be enshrined within
Yeah,
BuilderNet?
there is.
Or
so generally, right
okay,
now, the way it works is there is a rebate scheme that basically says if we will compensate you for the value that was not, or like it's basically it's kind of hard to explain
second
in
price
short,
option?
in brief terms, but you are getting the value that you added to the block over the next best transaction that could be included. So you're not getting the full value of the transactions you send.
Yeah.
You're getting, say there's 2 transactions, one of them in competing transactions. Yeah, you're capturing the diff of, say 2 ETH versus 1 ETH, rather than getting your full 2 ETH back. You're getting 1.
Yeah. I think that's basically the rebate on the second price auction, which I believe same thing as what Ultrasound is doing as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and just since ultrasound came up, I needed to dispel a myth. People think ultrasound is making a ton of money, and that like back in August with the Justin Drake noise, people were like, "Oh my God, he's making so much money from ultrasound." It was like, no, ultrasound is.
Who said that? Who said that?
Everyone online was screaming that ultrasound was printing money. And it's like that's actually just, it's
Really?
just barely getting by.
I was even happy that they were making any money from the second price auction.
It's paltry.
Yeah, it's pretty sad though. It's pretty sad.
And ultimately, like all of this is a second order effect of high value transactions moving off of the L1. So, some people would say that's cause for alarm, and some people would say that's scaling Ethereum. And I think those debates are a bit above my pay grade. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think realistically, like if you want to calculate how much ultrasound would have made like over the last year or so, like you can basically estimate it by just calculating all of the bids that came from ultrasound, the winning bids, and then find out the diff between the second highest and the top, and you basically would be able to calculate this is the total amount of profit that ultrasound could be made. But obviously, there might be some percentage splits between ultrasound and the builder submitting bids, and so I think if you calculate all of this, you will realize it's not like that much.
And ultimately, where the world needs to go is more towards a sealed price second bid auction at the relay level, and I think that'll be really exciting just to see verifiable relays at some point, because the burden that the builders bear. Like the huge bandwidth burden that they bear is mostly a byproduct of having open auctions at the relay level for the block auction. So building can get much more decentralized when the barrier to entry actually becomes very low, and the last look and latency games are diminished.
But the problem with the verifiable relay is like I don't think the idea itself is any problem. It's just that I don't know if there are like incentive for relays to innovate.
I've talked to some of them, and they're very interested in having lower costs, because that's ultimately what this would do for them, right? Running a relay shouldn't, ideally, we have more of them and they're cheaper. So relay builders aren't really making money. They're mostly public goods people funded by grants, or making a tiny bit of money from doing something like ultrasound is doing. But they're from my discussions with them, would be very happy to adopt something that was easier to run and more trustless and more verifiable.
Yeah, we'll see. I guess we'll be also curious if all of those guys gonna start moving their relay into some sort of like a TE, so that you can make some of the trade-off a lot secure, given that all those relays aren't already very optimistic, and if shit happens,
if TEs get to a point where they can be resilient to griefing attacks, then that could very well be the case. There's a good chance we see a new wave of tropical encryption. And I won't go into that now, but a new wave of tropical encryption research kind of take the space by storm, and we decide to sail in a different direction than trust maxing on TEs.
Cool. Brian, do you have any final questions? We got about 7 minutes here.
Yeah, sure. How about we open the floor to the audience? So anybody has any questions for the speakers and for Blair? Yeah, please feel free to raise your hand, and so that you can answer questions and specified speakers.
I think I saw Daniel's hand go up earlier.
Okay, Daniel, go ahead.
It may be easier to drop the comments in the comment section.
All right, cool.
Sorry, we have Janine.
Hello?
Hello.
Hey, I want to say thank you for having this MEV space. Thank you, EngineFi. Thank you for the speakers. It's great to hear some things that are happening right now with MEV, especially in this such a blind, nothing to see what's going on. It's good to hear. My question is OFAC compliance. Why are we increasing in that type of censorship? Right now, currently at 52%.
Because block builders don't want to get fucked by the mega power that is America.
So why is it up and down? Kind of.
I think that the OFAC for the builders are no longer a significant concern anymore, no?
Yeah, it just depends who you ask. For some, it is. For some, it isn't.
And maybe
I didn't.
Sorry.
No, I was just gonna say because I remember there was a period where I was looking at the censorship.pic and I was like, oh, Beaver build and Titan, I forgot which one, but they all stopped doing censorship and I was like, oh yo, why you guys stop censoring? I think the answer basically was just they find a legal ground for them to stop censoring. So I just assume that it's regulatory wise more plausible now to actually not censor and defend against any OFAC claim. That was my understanding there.
Probably also relatively easy to just kind of be non-censoring right now because maybe there's not a lot of transactions coming from these OFAC. I mean, as I understand, it's still kind of only the tornado addresses, right? And then, so there's very, very little actual kind of transactions that should be censored. So maybe you can just switch your builder to say it doesn't censor, and then if something major would happen, then you can, let's say, new addresses being added to the list, a new big kind of, then you can still stop, then you can still start censoring, right? Just kind of on demand, basically, right? That's hard to capture in these dashboards.
No, I don't think that was the case. That's not my understanding of why they shut down the censorship.
Okay.
But I think there were a couple of court cases around the last year, this year, still in 2024. This year that are revolving around the searchers and some of the languages that the court gave out, I think provided a lot of hints for the builders to actually like take some regulatory stance on some of the censorship. I believe that's also the reason why they now feel a lot more comfortable not censoring those transactions, giving those precedents.
It's interesting. Yeah.
Yuki's also a legal analyst in his spare time.
I think
Wait, sorry, Blair, what is it?
I said you're a legal analyst in your spare time.
Oh no, nothing more than Alex from your side.
Yeah, that's a whole nother Twitter Spaces.
I think he reads into every single line of the court ruling.
Yeah, I don't know how he consumes as much as he consumes, but yep. Lucy, you were going to say something?
Yeah, what do you think about privacy? So if transactions were more private, even sort of like maybe the trade would be public, or what the trade would be public, but maybe the addresses were kind of always sort of anonymous, right? Would that be an argument for plausible deniability for builders or relays or validators to say that we don't know what's in that? Kind of like WhatsApp can argue kind of, because that's end-to-end encrypted, WhatsApp can argue that they cannot be held responsible for what's happening inside of WhatsApp messages, right? Would privacy kind of provide that argument of plausible deniability, or is transactions just different field kind of where that's more strict?
Okay, we have final questions from data scientist.
Hi there, can you hear me, guys?
Yep.
Hello?
Yep.
Yeah.
Ah, great, cool. It's data science is my handle. It's Tom here from the UK. So good evening to everybody, and thank you for hosting the space. Is really informative. The question I had, the searchers, so Yoink and Coffee Babe, that you talked about at the head. How much is known about these guys? Do we think these are institutions or individual players?
That's a good question. I personally don't know for sure. How long have they been around? Does anyone know how long they've been around?
Wait, which one? Which one?
We're talking about the searchers. So it's like Coffee Babe, .eth, Turbo Builder, and Yoink.
I mean, Coffee Babe, I know, has been around at least a couple of years.
I mean, I think obviously, like, I don't have any idea of like whether they're institutional or not, but I also find it a little bit hard to discern what is to what extent an institution and what is not. Like, do you consider, you know, a 5-man dev shop trying to do some searching strategy as an institution, or, you know, like, is a single person searcher is non-institutional? Like, I think the line here isn't very, very clear in my opinion. Even like the Wintermute guys doing their like searching stuff, like, it's a Wintermute, but it's maybe just like a couple people in the Wintermute team that is really running the strategy. So yeah, it's I don't know if it's very clear to decipher how they're operating on this.
Okay, cool, thanks.
All right. It's been an hour. I think we can wrap it up now. So, some big thanks to other speakers, and especially to Blair being our co-host. So yeah, I mean, after the winter holidays, I think we are going to hold another one, maybe another one after all these times. So hopefully everybody can join us with all the top minds in the MEV landscape. We can discuss more about this dark forest. Okay, thank you guys.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.